भगवते वासुदेवाय नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयम् उदीरयेत् नष्टप्रायेषु अभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवती उत्तम श्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्ठिके कृष्णाय वासुदेवाय देवकी नंदनाय च नंदगोपकुमाराय गोविन्दाय नमो नमः। तामसात् च विकुर्वाणात् भगवद्वीर्यचोदितात् शब्दमात्रम् अभूत् तस्मान् नभः श्रोत्रं तु शब्दगम्। तामसात् च विकुर्वाणात् भगवद्वीर्यचोदितात् शब्दमात्रम् अभूत् तस्मान् नभः श्रोत्रं तु शब्दगम्। तामसात् च विकुर्वाणात् भगवद्वीर्यचोदितात् शब्दमात्रम् अभूत् तस्मान् नभः श्रोत्रं तु शब्दगम्। हरे कृष्ण। Word by word meaning, translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila Abhay Charanarvind Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Word by word meaning, tasmat, tamasat, from egoism in ignorance, cha, and vikurvana, undergoing transformation, bhagavat virya, by the energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, choditat, impelled, shabda matram, the subtle element sound, abhut, was manifested, tasmat, from that, navah, ether, srotram, the sense of hearing, tu, then, shabdagam, which catches sound. Translation. When egoism in ignorance is agitated by the sex energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the subtle element sound is manifested, and from sound come the ethereal sky and the sense of hearing. Purport. It appears from this verse that all the objects of our sense gratification are the products of egoism in ignorance. It is understood from this verse that by agitation of the element of egoism in ignorance, the first thing produced was sound, which is the subtle form of ether. It is stated also in the Vedanta Sutra that sound is the origin of all objects of material possession, and that by sound one can also dissolve this material existence. Anavritti Shabda means liberation by sound. The entire material manifestation began from sound, and sound can also end material entanglement if it has a particular potency. The particular sound capable of doing this is a transcendental vibration, Hare Krishna. Our entanglement in material affairs has begun from material sound. Now we must purify that sound in a spiritual understanding. There is sound in the spiritual world also. If we approach that sound, then our spiritual life begins, and the other requirements for spiritual advancement can be supplied. We have to understand very clearly that sound is the beginning of the creation of all material objects for our sense gratification. Similarly, if sound is purified, our spiritual necessities also are produced from sound. Here it is said that from sound, the ether become manifested, and from that, the air become manifested from ether. How the ethereal sky comes from sound, how the air comes from sky, and how fire comes from air will be explained later on. Sound is the cause of the sky, and the sky is the cause of srotram, the ear. The ear is the first sense for receiving knowledge. One must give oral reception to any knowledge one wants to receive, either material or spiritual. Therefore, srotram is very important. The Vedic knowledge is called Shruti. Knowledge has to be received by hearing. By hearing only can we have access to either material or spiritual enjoyment. In the material world, we manufacture many things for our material comfort simply by hearing. They are already there, but just by hearing, one can transform them. If we want to build a very high skyscraper, this does not mean that we have to create it. The materials for the skyscraper, wood, metal, earth, etc. are already there. but we make our intimate relationship with those already created material elements by hearing how to utilize them. Modern economic advancement for creation is also a product of hearing, and similarly, one can create a favorable field of spiritual activities by hearing from the right source. Arjuna was a gross materialist in the bodily conception of life and was suffering from the bodily concept very acutely. But simply by hearing, Arjuna became a spiritualized, Krishna conscious person. Hearing is very important, and that hearing is very important, and that hearing is produced from the sky. By hearing only can we make proper use of that which already exists. The principle of hearing to properly utilize preconceived materials is applicable to spiritual paraphernalia as well. We must hear from the proper spiritual source. Om Jnanatmirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupah Kada Mahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Yuta Padkamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagar Jatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tang Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parjana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakhanvitamscha Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Iti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirbishesha Shunyavadi Paschat Desha Tarane हे कृष्ण करुणा सिंधो दीन बंधो जगतपते गोपेश गोपिका कांता राधा कांता नमोस्तुते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्री वासादि गौर भक्त वृंद हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। करोति वाचालं कृपातमहं श्रीवद्दीनतारणं परमानन्दमाधवं श्री चैतन्येश्वरम्। Hare Krishna. So, every sloka of Srimad Bhagavatam is very important. Otherwise, Srila Sukadeva Goswami would not have discussed or explained those verses to Parikshit Maharaj, who was in an emergency situation, right? So, from that angle, we should understand why fundamental principles of material nature has been so elaborately discussed by Sukadeva Goswami to Maharaj Parikshit. Both are great devotees. It's mentioned that in second canto, one is called Vishnu Rath, one is called Brahma Rath. Right? So Vishnu Ratham Brisham Preto Vishas, like that. Sorry, Brahma Ratha Brisham Preto Vishnu Rathena Samsadi. Both were actually great devotees of Krishna, and whatever they would have discussed definitely has to have great relevance, very highly good, well connected to Krishna, right? So from that angle, we should appreciate whatever has been discussed here, right? So it's mentioned when ego is in ignorance, is agitated by the sex energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the subtle element sound is manifested. And from sound come the ethereal sky and the sense of hearing. So now there are multiple aspects here. One is the subtle material elements, right? The subtle form of or subtle source of our sense perception, right? Tanmatra, right? So from that actually eventually all the gross perception of our senses that get developed, right? So sound, the hearing, right? So like that. So we will see how actually Srila Prabhupada has focused on so many aspects in this sloka, even in purport and the class he has taken on this, right? So let's discuss some of them. First thing is mentioned here, that, from the sound is the origin of all objects of material possessions. And by sound, one can also dissolve this existence, right? So from the most subtle sound, then you have ether, then sky, then air, then fire, then water, then earth, right? So gradually earth has all rupa, ras, sabda, gandha, sparsa, like all aspects of sense perception are available in earth, right? So when it rains, right, we feel a different fragrance or aroma of the earth, right? So any plant or any product, basically coming out of earth, right? So that has different flavors, different fragrance or stench, whatever we call, that all comes from earth, right? So it has rupa, ras, shabda, gandha, sparsa. Now, it is mentioned that the sound, material sound, it's contaminated by actually ignorance, right? So if we, basically Srila Prabhupada says that if we try to access the sound in pure form, right? For example, the vibration of Hare Krishna Mahamantra or the Om syllable, that is also mentioned, but we will get to that. So if we access the pure sound, then we can gradually remove our own ignorance, and we can actually go back to spiritual world. We can wind up our material entanglement here by basically reciting or by actually hearing the sound, the transcendental sound, in pure form. So that's one focus. By sound, the entire material creation manifested, and gradually we will, by practicing the hearing of pure sound, especially Hare Krishna Mantra, we can basically solve our material, we can finish our material existence. Now, there are multiple. First thing Srila Prabhupada begins in this topic is that these are all basically created, or it is made to happen by the potency of Krishna. It is not that it is happening automatically. The material manifestation which has happened, so material ingredients, where has it come from? All the like Panch Mahabhut, which would have seen in previous verses, right? So all the great material elements like Panch Mahabhut, right? It's called Mahabhut, like the greatest of the 5 elements, right? So where has it come from? That all has come from Krishna's external energy, right? So Krishna is in charge of, like he has external energy, internal energy, and then he has like a marginal potential like us, the living entity, living souls, right? The souls, right? So this, whether it's a material universe or the spiritual planets, right? They all are basically Krishna's energies, right? So we have to understand that the way material elements, they interact with each other, the reaction, how it happens, right? So the source, the material element itself is Krishna's energy, and it combines in particular ways, right? That is also by Krishna's inspiration. As Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita, Maya Dhakshena Prakriti Soyate Svacharacharam Hetu Nanena Kaunteya Jagad Viprivartate. So material scientists, they are able to observe only, that if you mix 2 elements in a particular proportion, particular condition, then something will be produced. But they don't know the hand behind that, like from who has supplied these material elements, who has defined the nature, that if 2 elements, like, the innate nature of different elements, and the innate quality that if 2 things mix up, then this has to happen. So who has defined? They have just noticed, the scientists have just noticed it and made a rule, they have defined some, some chemical laws, if you mix this, then it happens. But who defined those things at first place? The nature of, that reaction, or the nature of the individual element itself, that is under the direction of Krishna's material energy. So that's in ultimate sense, it's all by basically Krishna's will, right? So it happens under the direction of material energy, which is controlled by Krishna. So we must understand that it's not, like somehow or other these material elements came into existence and things are going on its own, which is called Niriswarvad. In 16th chapter Bhagavad Gita, the demon, it's mentioned that the demons think that the material universe, material world has come into existence on its own. There is no other controller behind that. There is no person behind that. So that we should not we should not think like that. We should understand there is a person, supreme person behind this great cosmic manifestation, right? And it's not independent in nature, right? So that's one aspect. Now we will see, understand some other aspects also. Yeah, further it's actually mentioned that Krishna says that if we just understand it more in more detail, that this mode of material nature, right? So they also actually are emanating from basically these are the three divisions of external energy of Krishna, and Krishna is in charge, right? Satogun, Rajogun, Tamogun. So Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, 7th chapter, 12th verse, ये चैव सात्विका भावा राम राजसास्तामसाश्चये मत्त एवेते तान विद्धि न तु अहम तेसु ते मयि. I am not in material modes. They are under my control. They are there, right? They are coming from me, basically coming from my energy, basically. So we should understand. So having fully established this aspect, that yes, this reaction of material element, everything is happening by basically the arrangement of material nature, which is under the control of Krishna, right? So now let's actually focus on some other aspects, right? So there is one more thing, yeah. So Srila Prabhupada had talked about, the Vedic sounds, right? In the pure form, it is called Shabda Brahma. Shabda Brahma is the Vedas or the Vedic knowledge, right? And it is called Shruti, right? So here is the first sense for, yeah, let's actually talk about it. The ear is the first sense for receiving knowledge. So, earlier I used to think that, eyes are the most important sense for senses for anyone. I used to think that. But then later from Srila Prabhupada books, I came to know that ear is the most important. Even if a person is blind, right, and is able to hear, right, hear sound, right, then that person can liberate himself and go back to spiritual world. But just by hearing transcendental sound, either Hare Krishna Mahamantra and basically hearing messages of Krishna from Srimad Bhagavad Gita, from Srimad Bhagavatam, right? Srila Prabhupada mentions in the lecture that the most pure sound is basically the sound from Srimad Bhagavatam. So just by hearing, actually Srila Prabhupada mentions here, next line, if you see, one must give oral reception, right? Reception to any knowledge one wants to receive, either material or spiritual. So again, reception means we have a welcoming attitude, right? Otherwise, instead of reception, it becomes rejection, right? Or even physically, we are, present in, let's suppose there is a class going on, some very great devotees talking on topics of Gita Bhagavatam. We are maybe present there physically, but if our mind is, engaged somewhere else, then we are not actually receiving. We are not giving the oral reception to that topic which is being discussed, right? So it's very important. That's why, like Srila Prabhupada says, scrutinizingly reading the scriptures. So oral reception means the mind and the ears, they are fully focused on basically the topic being discussed, right? So if we are receptive to the knowledge, then basically what happens? Through the ear, it goes to our heart and it transforms our heart slowly, right? So that's very important. A little bit I should explain, elaborate on, what types of spiritual sounds, right? Typically, general perception is there, Om. Om is the root, basically sound, right? Root spiritual sound. Yeah, Om is there, but Hare Krishna Srila Prabhupada says that it includes everything. And this is the most powerful, it's the Mahamantra for this Kali Yuga, right? So we should be fully, convinced, and we should be fully, we should fully adhere to this, that Hare Krishna Mahamantra is the most purifying, most powerful spiritual sound, and we should actually practice chanting that, hearing that. So regarding Om, actually in Bhagavad Gita, it's mentioned, Krishna says, Om iti ekaksharang, Om iti ekaksharang Brahma vyaharan ma anusmaran. Yah prayati tejan deham sayati parpang gatim. That's 8.13, right? But the thing is, what is mentioned is, Om iti ekaksharam Brahma Vyaharan Mam Anusmaran. See, it's not that Krishna says, let's actually open that verse. That will be good. 13. Om iti ekaksharam Brahma Vyaharan Mam Anusmaran. See, Mam Anusmaran is the most important. It doesn't say, Krishna doesn't say that, just utter the syllable Om and that's it. You don't need to be connected with it. No. Here clearly it's in the sloka itself it's mentioned. Not that, it's being made up here. See, Mam Anusmaran. Yeah. Remembering Krishna. After being situated in this yoga practice and vibrating the sacred syllable Om, if one thinks of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and quits his body, he will certainly reach the spiritual planet. But if some yogis, they think that, Om syllable is independent of Krishna, they don't need to think of Krishna, just they can go on reciting the syllable Om, they will reach where? They will reach Brahmajyoti. The Srila Prabhupada has said clearly in the lecture on this verse, like this verse, 32nd verse. Yeah. So if they are just attached to pronouncing Om and they are following other principles recommended for that, then at the time of death, by chanting Om, they will go to spiritual effulgence, not to Vaikuntha planets, right? So for that, one has to chant the basically pure sound, which is recommended by Krishna himself in his appearance at Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He said he established the Yuga Dharma. See, what has to be practiced to reach to Krishna? If Krishna says something, we have to follow that, rather than thinking that we can study Vedas, we can study this, and then we can find something based on our own intelligence, and that's basically foolish. So we should follow basically that process which has been mentioned by or established by Krishna, right? So Krishna has said, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, like non-different from Krishna, he has said that we should basically chant Hare Krishna Mahamantra as much as possible, right? So Srila Prabhupada says that, actually Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's teaching is Kirtaniya Sadahari, right? So that means essentially chanting Hare Krishna Mahamantra and basically hearing, hearing and then preaching the Krishna's glories, right? Hari Katha, Krishna Katha, based out of Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, and then Chaitanya Charitamrita. So that's one aspect. Yeah. So now we will see a few other aspects, about spiritual sounds. So we will see that how actually it began, this material manifestation, right? By the way, before that only Krishna further establishes that whether a spiritual material world, everything comes from him in Bhagavad Gita. So actually speaking, Bhagavad Gita has all the seed formulas, right? And we understand that over time through the medium of Srimad Bhagavatam, and even later Srimad Bhagavatam is further more elaborated through Chaitanya Charitamrita. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Aham sarvasya prabhuvo matta sarvam pravartate iti matva bhaktimam buddhabhav samanvita, right? Everything comes from him, right? I'm source of all spiritual and material worlds. Everything emanates from me. The wise who perfectly know this engage in my devotional service and worship me with all their hearts, right? So again and again, we have to be aware that this material world has not come, out of nowhere. Yeah. So now actually going into, the effect of or the causality of this pure sound towards this entire material existence, right? So when like this Srishti, right, the creation happened, then we all know, right, from Krishna, then Lord Sankarsana, and all the way to really when in each universe, when Garbhodak Sai Vishnu is lying down, and then from the lotus stem coming out of his navel, then on top of the lotus Brahmaji is there. So when Brahmaji performs tapasya and Lord Vishnu, like Garbhodak Sai Vishnu, he actually is pleased with him and he gives him his audience to Brahmaji. Then what happens? Lord Vishnu delegates the task of creation, secondary creation, to Brahmaji. Now, for that, great knowledge is required, right? Then what happened? That Lord Vishnu, essentially you can say Lord Krishna, actually manifested or amplified the knowledge within the heart of Brahmaji, right? So that's what is mentioned. Tene Brahma Hridaya Adi Kavaye, right? So Hrida, in the heart, right? The spiritual knowledge that comes, that manifests in the heart, because Paramatma is present, he is present everywhere, but sitting in the region of heart, he gives the impetus and knowledge to the sincere soul who wants to approach him or wants to serve him, right? So in the heart of Brahmaji, Krishna manifested all the knowledge. How? Again, that also happened through the spiritual sound vibration, right? It is mentioned somewhere that, from Krishna's flute, multiple, basically, different Gayatri, actually mantras, that also manifested. And Brahmaji also actually received the knowledge, essential knowledge, Vedic knowledge in the heart. And personally, Krishna also mentioned the 4 essential verses of Srimad Bhagavatam to Brahmaji, right? So everything is, all the knowledge, spiritual knowledge or material knowledge is manifested via the medium of purified sound, right? So Hare Krishna Mahamantra being the most basically pure, we should practice that. And Brahmaji, actually, when he heard this, so this entire Vedic knowledge was passed, through disciplic succession by the medium of Shruti, right? Brahmaji narrated basically the knowledge about Krishna and essentially the Vedic knowledge to Naradaji, right? And Naradaji further actually shared it with Vyasadeva, Krishnadeva and Vyas, right? And Krishnadeva and Vyas also heard it through basically hearing, right? The Shruti, right? Entire Veda is called Shruti, right? Like that. So, yeah, that's important. And then we will see, we can see there are many places where it is mentioned and that knowledge came basically via the medium of the spiritual sound. So further it's mentioned when Shukdev Goswami performs Mangalacharan, before attempting to answer questions of Parikshit Maharaj, there it's mentioned, Vitan Vatajasya Sating Smriting Hridi. So it's further mentioned that from within the heart, Krishna amplified the knowledge, what was needed, for the creation and all the and the steps of Srishti, right? So that's one thing. Sabda Brahma was imparted or vibrated by Krishna in the heart of Brahma, right? So multiple places. And the knowledge received through oral reception was so potent that Brahmaji had full, realization of Krishna's Naam, Rupa, Guna, Lila, right? And he was able to even see the basically spiritual world, right? He was able to see the Vaikuntha, right? And then he actually, in glorification of Krishna and his abode, he composed those, verses which is called Brahma Samhita, right? So the 5th chapter of Brahma Samhita, which we actually refer in ISKCON. So the famous sloka in which Brahmaji actually mentions about the situation of spiritual world, that is Golok Vrindavan also he was able to see, right? Chintamani Prakara Sadmaso Kalpa Vriksha Lakshavrte Susurvira Vipalayantam Lakshmi Sahasra Sata Sambhrama Sevyamanam Govindam Adipurusam Tamam Bhajami, right? And another thing we can understand is that basically this material creation, when it happened, before that Krishna was present, right? So if Krishna is present and he says that, this sound, material element, material sound, this is also created when the egoism is influenced by a mode of ignorance, right? So essentially, another inference from this is that Krishna was already present before the creation happened, right? So that's another aspect which Srila Prabhupada has emphasized, right? So it's mentioned, Aham evasam evagre nanyat yat sat param. Right? So Krishna is present before the creation. So creation is not independent. It is caused by him. And the Om syllable has its root in Krishna, not as traditionally people think that it has a root in Lord Shiva. No, the Om's origin or the basically basis is Krishna. It's impersonal, representation of Krishna actually. The Om syllable itself. Yeah. Then there are now actually, there is another aspect on which I would basically emphasize. Hearing the pure sound, basically, by that we can dissolve our material existence, and we can be purified, and then we can actually go back to our constitutional position, which is a spiritual world, right? So the most famous among them is Hare Krishna Mahamantra and basically Krishna Katha topics from Srimad Bhagavatam. Yeah, specifically Srimad Bhagavatam is mentioned. So we will hear what are the effects of purified sounds, hearing the purified sound message from Srimad Bhagavatam. From the beginning itself, the hearing process and our ears, right? That has been, through the ear, how do we receive it, right? And what are the effects of hearing the pure sound, right? So those things are, explained throughout Srimad Bhagavatam. It begins even in first canto, multiple places, like it says, Srinvatam Sokha Krishna, Punya Sravan Kirtanaha, Hridayanta Asthohi Abhadrani, Vidhanoti Surit Satam. See, Srinvatam means Srila Prabhupada says, let's, see that. He says that those who develop the urge to hear the message of, yeah. It's important to, It's important to see even the word meanings, what Srila Prabhupada has mentioned, yeah. Srinvata means those who have developed the urge to hear the message of, right? So first of all, what it means is we have the urge in our heart, we have sense of, urgency, or we have a sense of hankering, right? And then basically when we receive, that is called oral reception. It's the reception, as I discussed earlier. It is like fully focused thing, right? Not listening. There is a difference between hearing and listening, and hearing with rapt attention, right? Listening with rapt attention, all these things, right? So then through the medium of ear, basically, when we receive a message of Krishna, essentially Srimad Bhagavatam message, what happens? He specifically cleanses, basically, yeah. He especially cleanses the desire for material enjoyment, right? So that's one interesting thing to understand, right? What's the effect of attentively listening to Srimad Bhagavatam topics? Of course, especially if we hear from Srila Prabhupada and his bona fide disciples, that is much more effective, actually. And similarly, what it also means the other way. Now there can be a question, actually, our eyes are, our ears are not fully pure, Right now, it's a bit contaminated in the sense that we hear not only, Bhagavatam message, but we hear so many other things which are, somewhat, related to our personal enjoyment also, right? If we are hearing anything, which is for general enjoyment, then it means that our ears are not fully pure, right? So that's what the cycle, it looks like a cycle, but the thing is, by continuously practicing hearing, Srimad Bhagavatam and Hare Krishna Mahamantra, from pure devotees, and our own chanting, right, sincere chanting, then we gradually purify our senses, especially ear and all the senses, basically, we purify, right? And then basically, if we hear from even one person, it is mentioned, let me open that, that's a very interesting thing. 9th canto 24:62. Let's open that and see here. What a great message has been given towards the end of 9th canto. Yasmin Satkarna Piyuse Yasas Tirthavare Sakrit Srotranjali Upasprisya Dhunute Karma Vasna. Yeah, see. Simply by receiving the glories of Lord through purified transcendental ears, right? This, see, what a like a genius of Prabhupada, right? Everything, every disciple of Maharaj, they actually quote that, every word of Srila Prabhupada can be elaborated so much. Yeah, purified transcendental ears. The devotees of the Lord are immediately freed from strong material desires and engagement in fruitive activities. So the tendency which we have to, remain here, essentially, in material world, and somehow adjust, situation around us, that tendency can be purified if we hear even once. Yeah, or that is not mentioned in translation, but we can see Sakrid means here, yes, means Sakrid, right? Sakrid means once, or Sakrid means multiple times. See here, yeah, only once, immediately, right? Both the meanings, right? So every word, that's why it's Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He mentions, among the top 5 elements of the bhakti. There are so many, but he selected, some 5, in that actually, Mathura Sadhu Seva, service to Vaishnava, so many things, other things are there. But he has mentioned Bhagavatartha Rasaswadan also. So very carefully we have to, read and hear. Even once if we hear from, pure devotee and we receive through purified transcendental ears, right? So then we can be freed from the karma vasana, essentially. Dhunate karma vasana, right? Dhunate means again, this is like a very, it's a cleansing. Dhunate is typically means, the meaning is destroys or cleansing, fully destruction, right? So, that's the glory of Srimad Bhagavatam. We have to pay attention to each word. Even if we are not able to pronounce it, that's different. But hearing and reading can always be done, right? Even if we are not expert in reciting the complicated Sanskrit words, but we can still, read through it and hear. Srila Prabhupada's lectures are lectures by great one of the disciples of Srila Prabhupada. So that's very important. It actually works. It happens. It's not theoretical knowledge. It actually cleanses our desire to remain here. That's one thing. There are several places. Let's refer a few more things, right? Very interesting things. The effect of hearing, right? So sporadically I'm going here and there, but all are related to this, right? Yasyam ve sruyamanayam Krishne param puruse bhaktir utpadyate punsaha shokamoha bhayapaha. See, simply again the reception word comes. See, everywhere it's like receptive. We have to be receptive. Simply by giving oral reception to this Vedic literature, the feeling for loving devotional service to Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, sprouts up at once. At once, not that, means maybe 20 years later or what. To extinguish the fire of lamentation, illusion, and fearfulness, right? So, so moha and bhaya, right? Everything goes away, right? If we keep on hearing, right? So, ear is the most effective, And the source was, as we discussed initially, source is same. The, tanmatra and basically the sound, the ether and all this thing we discussed, right? So, see, the ears are so important that even when a man is asleep, very, deep sleep, right? Even then, if you have set up alarm clock, right? How do we wake up someone who is sleeping? By sound, right? So the same thing from our, this slumber in material world, right? Overall, our life that is entangled in material world, right? So the spiritual awakening can be affected through the means of purified sound, right? And kindly Krishna actually appears, it's mentioned by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Chaitanya Charitamrita that out of great compassion, Krishna, he manifests the Vedas and the Vedic knowledge and Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam doesn't get destroyed. It manifests out of its own sweet will. Yesterday I was reading. So Srimad Bhagavatam kindly Krishna manifested for this purpose only, that we can be awakened from our material slumber and regain our spiritual position. So we saw this. There are several other references. Quickly, maybe 2-3 more references we will see. The glory of hearing transcendental sound. Here we have this. And let's see. One of my all-time favorite. Parikshit Maharaj says this, by the way, not Sukdev Goswami. Parikshit Maharaj is glorifying. Before asking question, he himself glorifies the message of Krishna. Srinvata Sradhaya Nityam Granatascha Swacheshtitam. Voluntarily. Seriously by one's own endeavor, not by force. Srinvata Sradhaya Nityam Granatascha Swacheshtitam Kalena Nati Dirghena Bhagavan Vishate Hrdi. Right? So see, persons who hear Srimad Bhagavatam regularly and are always taking the matter very seriously will have the personality of Godhead Sri Krishna manifested in their hearts within a short time. That short time depends on our seriousness, sincerity, and hankering, like that. See, the next verse is even more important. Pravishta, see, this actually is central and directly aligned to today's topic. Pravishta karnarandrena swanang bhava sarorupam dhunoti shamalam Krishna salilasya yathasara. Right? See, Pravishta, by entering through the holes of the ears, right? Very important here. The sound incarnation of Sri Krishna, the Supreme Soul, that is Srimad Bhagavatam. See, sound incarnation of Krishna, direct sound incarnation of Krishna is Srimad Bhagavatam, right? If Krishna enters through the heart, how? Through the medium of ear, right? And then sits on the lotus flower of the loving relationship and cleanses. Cleaning and cleansing is different, right? Cleansing means, like as I mentioned earlier in some discussions, like a sponge, right? So if it is dirty, then it is dirty inside. Yeah, to actually clean it, you need several, intake the water and squeeze out again, right? That's cleansing, deep cleansing the dust of material association, right? That happens through, basically Krishna does it, but we have to sincerely receive the message. It's not our own, based on our endeavor that we will do. We don't do that. Only Paramatma, like Krishna Paramatma, has the power to do that. And when he's satisfied with our, genuine sincerity in heart, he sees our, sincerity, to what level we have developed sincerity and genuine desire to connect with him. To that degree, he cleanses within the heart, right? So, similarly, we have, very interesting one more thing. Finally, the contrast I would like to show here. Let's see the second canto, third chapter, very important, 37 probably, as I think, or 20. Let's see, basically towards the end. I think here only. Yeah, this is the Bile Batoru Praman. Let me see. Actually, that's very important. The persons who don't hear, the message. So, this sloka. 19th is also there, but let's actually refer to this. Let Bile Batoru Krama Vikraman. See what is mentioned. One who has not listened to the messages about the prowess and marvelous acts of the personality of Godhead and has not sung or chanted loudly the worthy songs about the Lord is to be considered to possess ear holes like the holes of snakes, right? So this one. So if we don't utilize, the hearing potency which we have, then, and especially in human form of life, see, ears like animals also have ears, right? Monkeys also have ears, right? But only in human form of life we can actually hear and make sense of what is being said, right? Only in human life we can have this Athato Brahma Jigyasa, and we can basically develop the inquiries, right? Who am I? Where have I come from? Where will I go? These fundamental questions only in human form of life can be developed, right? And why am I suffering? Sometimes feeling not so basically distressed, but again, mostly it's a misery, right? Whether it's a subtle or gross, right? So is there a permanent solution to all these things, right? Essentially the material existence, right? So can we resolve this permanently? This inquiry can be developed only in human form of life. So just ears as an organ is not sufficient. If we are like, a proper human being, then we can make sense of the sounds which we receive. Animals have ears, but they cannot make out, whether it's a Bhagavatam class being spoken or it's just a noise for them, right? It's just a noise for them. So, if we have not utilized our basically hearing tendency using this ear sense, then it's compared with the holes of snakes. That's it. So I just wanted to, talk on both positive, what is intended, what is recommended, and what is the situation when we don't, engage the ears for, our ultimate, basically liberation to spiritual world, right? So this is what I wanted to cover in today's discussion. If there is any question, we could discuss that. Any question? Otherwise, we could stop here. Okay. ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय, श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय।